The first thing David does is he admits that he is distressed. And I think that's an example to you and I, because the first thing we need to do is we need to be honest with God when we are angry. Don't try to cover it up. Be honest with God when you're angry. It's that scene from Kicking and Screaming. I've said that so many times just because I get a kick out of it. When he says, I'm angry. I've even memorized it. I'm angry. I'm spitting angry. I'm like a tornado of anger, just swirling about. My heart rate is dangerously high right now. I've told that to my wife when I was really angry, just to try to get some humor to kind of lighten up the moment before, when we're dealing with these things, how do we deal with it except that we're honest with God, but we've got to go to God within our prayer closet. What do I mean by a prayer closet? I mean that you have some place where you can be away from other people and get alone with God and spend some personal time with Him and be honest with Him. You see, we need to be honest with God when we're angry. And David says, hear me when I call. He's asking God to hear him because you are the God of my righteousness and you've relieved me of my distress. He is honest that he's distressed out. And the first point, being honest with God when you're angry, but talk to Him first and don't sugarcoat your true feelings and thoughts. Don't try to sugarcoat God. Does God not know what you're really experiencing inside your heart? You see, I think sometimes we have this picture of God that, there are a variety of extremes we can take in our misconceptions of God. But one is that we think that, somehow that in order to ever talk to God, I have to always be happy-go-lucky, and that's not true. I'd say a lot of times some of us will probably experience the other, and the only time we ever talk to God is when we're angry or something stressed out, right? Some of us evangelical Christians who have embraced grace and mercy so much that sometimes I feel guilty like I'm a user, and that's the only time I talk to God is when I'm stressed out or when things are going wrong. But it does me no good to try to sugarcoat my feelings and try to act like I am something that I'm not. I might as well be honest with God. And you know what? Sometimes I find that my anger is directed at God Himself. And I'm careful with that. But if I'm willing to be honest with it and to try to see things from God's perspective, God's shoulders are big enough to be able to handle my burdens that I need to pour to Him. So I need to be honest with Him. But look here, I see first that David, in his example of being honest with God when he's angry, the first thing I see is that he helps us to view the conflict in the light of God's character. So you're going to go and pray about it. I'm going to go pray because I'm angry. Sounds like something my mom used to tell me to do when I was a little kid. You need to count to 10. You need to go talk to God, right? I don't know, did your parents ever do anything like that for you? My mom and my dad told me to count to 10, and it would make me so much more angry when he would tell me to count to 10. I'd just be like, I don't want to count to 10, right? And I just don't want to do it. And then when a threat came, followed that, and I said, okay, and I started counting. By the time I got to 10, I was just kind of starting to giggle, But I find sometimes we need to do that with God, right? And we need to be honest with them. But we need to first view the conflict in light of God's character. If you claim to be a Christian here today, then you claim to be a follower of Jesus. You claim to have denied your flesh and to taken up your cross and to follow Him. You claim to have seen the world through His eyes. You have a worldview that sees Him as the sovereign God over everything. And if He is sovereign over everything, then in effect, He has allowed me to be, at the very minimum, allowed me to be in the situation that I am in that has caused me a lot of stress. Well, David sees here that he's got to get God's character in view, and so he says, hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. God is the God of my righteousness. That's who He is. In other words, I don't have any righteousness. That's possessive, my righteousness. He says, hear me, O God, when I call God of your righteousness. God who is righteous. He doesn't say that. He says, God of my righteousness. In other words, I realize the only righteousness I have it's of mine. It comes through you. My righteousness is from you, God. And that you are the only one who is truly righteous. And that if it was not for your work in my life, I couldn't do anything. He's not only He's the God of my righteousness, but He's also the God who has relieved me in my distress. Isn't that what He says? Hear me when I call God of my righteousness. You have relieved me in my distress. Has God relieved you from stress in the past? See, all too often when we're angry, we forget the past deliverances of God, don't we? And all we see is red, all we see is anger, all we see is a situation before us, and we forget how faithful God was to us in the past. And David says, you're the one who's relieved me of my stress in the past. He's realizing God's character here, and then he goes on to say, have mercy on me and hear my prayer. So the first step is to get alone with God, right? And to be honest with God and to view the conflict in light of His character. He views God as being the God of His righteousness, the one who's delivered him from stress in the past, and he also sees that He is the merciful God. Do you realize that God is exceedingly merciful, such that there's no one in the universe who is more merciful than Almighty God Himself? And you know, I can prove it. You're alive. You exist. We have offended Him over and over and over again, and yet He continues to have mercy upon us. That's the great God that He is. He will have mercy on whom He will have mercy. His mercy endures forever, as the Psalmist says. He's a merciful God. So David views this conflict in light of God's character, but then look at verse 2. Now he views the conflict in light of sinful human nature. He says, but now, how long, O you sons of men, will you bring my glory to shame? How long will you love worthlessness and seek falsehood? He's telling us what the source of his anxiety is. And what is the source? It's you, sons of men. There are apparently some guys out there that are really stressing Dave out and really causing a lot of problems for him, and he's angry about it. As a matter of fact, there's an indication here by the fact that he calls them sons of men that these might have been great guys. These might have been noble guys, powerful guys, guys of power that were in some kind of prominent position. But clearly he sees that the source of his anxiety is coming from these men who are tormenting him. Someone in his life is causing problems. And his opponents in their anger will not stop insulting him, will they? Because he says, how long, will you sons of men, will you turn my glory into shame? How long will you turn the very things that I value the most into something despicable? How long will you continue to insult me and to belittle me? Isn't that what sinful anger does? Let's look at it from the sinful side of it. Isn't that what sinful anger does? Sinful anger lumps ideas and personalities together in condemning characterizations, doesn't it? Sinful anger lumps together personalities and ideas into a condemning characterization. What do I mean? Is that instead of saying, you know what, you lied about me, we now say you're a liar. What's the difference? The difference is that you lied about me speaks of a specific act. To say that you are a liar speaks of your new character now that I am attributing to you. Not only did you have an active lie, that is all you ever do. You see the danger in that? That's exactly what sinful anger does, is it refuses to separate the person from the act. Now the act the person committed once, twice, however many times, and the person now are solemnly put together, and now whatever we see that person, we see their act, and that's all we see of them. And that's not godly now, is it? What if God did that to you? But that's exactly what we do, isn't it? These guys are taking the very thing that David loves and turn it to shame. And what else sinful anger does is it creates characters, doesn't it? It creates what we call straw men. Do you know what we mean when we say a straw man? A straw man is not really a real man unless you're in the Wizard of Oz, okay? A straw man is something you build up a scarecrow, and he's not real, but the crows are still supposed to be afraid of him, correct? And You know, you can punch him, you can do whatever you want to him, but he's not a real guy. So if you go, you can build the straw man and do whatever you want to him, but it's not like doing it to a real person. But sometimes people in their mind will convince themselves that the straw man is the real thing. And we start building these things up in our minds and our sinful anger towards someone, and we start thinking that they have done this and that they have done this, and we start, again, making all these wrong connections that God would never do. That's what these men are doing to David. That's what they're doing. See, because sinful anger loves to skew the picture to make the self look better, doesn't it? Sinful anger will totally skew the picture to make myself look better. Oh no, I'm not telling her I'm sorry. I'm not telling him I'm sorry because they're going to expect it every time. And if I tell them they're sorry, they're going to think that everything that they did was okay. Oh no, I am not going to humble myself here. No way. That's sinful, church. See, David says here that they love worthlessness, don't they? He says, how long will you love worthlessness and seek falsehood? They love worthlessness. They love things that aren't, they love these lies that aren't true, is essentially what David is saying. He's saying there's these lies that they're clinging to and they're not even true. It's worthless. If it's based upon a lie, it's seriously flawed and skewed, and they love it because it makes themselves look better. They love these lies because it makes themselves look better, and they're far more concerned with their image than with reality. I think far too often we are not honest enough about this when we get into conflicts, do we? We're not honest enough about it. That really, oftentimes, we're more concerned about our image and how we're going to look in the end things than we are concerned about the reality of the situation and what's happening in the middle of it. Because I would say if that was so, then the Christian ought to realize that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. And if I realize that, then I'm no longer going to be connecting the person with the act, correct? They committed the act, but that doesn't mean that that's their whole life. I would recognize that there's some spiritual force involved behind the scenes here. But no, far too often, in our sinful anger, we are more concerned with image than reality. And sinful anger is hot-headed and impulsive, isn't it? It's hot-headed and impulsive, and it speedily rushes into making judgments about people, doesn't it? We rush into making judgments when we're angry, don't we? And we assume the worst, and sometimes we try to make excuses, and there's all different kinds of levels there. But sinful anger, it's hot-headed, it's impulsive, and it's reactionary rather than responding in a cool, collected manner. Rather than taking the time to critically assess what's really going on, making judgments, not being judgmental. Sinful anger is emotional reactivity masquerading as rationality. What I mean is, you know how emotional reactive sinful anger is, right? It's just like, I'll tell you beep, 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 and this, blah, and we're masking around, and I can give you factual evidence for why you're this way, and this is who you are, and this is what you're doing. I can give you the facts. Let me lay them out for you. And what are they doing? They're really just masquerading. I'm rational. I'm not angry. I'm rational. This is why. And these are the reasons. Masquerading, when really it's just sinful anger. In their emotional process of hostile judgmentalism, they are above correction. They seek falsehood. That's what these men are doing to David. And you know what he says after that? Selah. What does Selah mean? It means think about that one, chew on it for a little while. It means just sit there and think about that. So David's thinking about these things. This is what I love. This is Selah, these pause. It's like a pause in the psalm. Pause. Meditate on that for a while. We have no problem with that pause, do we? I have no problem with pausing to think about what other people do and what they've done to me and how they've sinned against me, and viewing the conflict in light of their sinful human nature, because they are the sinful ones, and then there no doubt is sin being committed here among David's enemies, among his opponents. But David doesn't stop there, does he? Because he goes on in verse 4 to say, be angry and do not sin. Meditate within your heart on your bed and be still.